Welcome to another episode of Management Muse. I'm your host, Cindi Baldi, and this is my husband and co-host, Geoffrey Tumlin.
Yellow! Welcome to the podcast where we try to inspire better work performance. Thanks for listening.
All right, thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. Today we are talking abuses around PTO.
PTO abuse.
Because Geoffrey had a lot of passion about it.
I've got a lot to say about this.
All right.
Stemming from a number of our clients who basically overcomplicate their PTO system. And so a couple definitions, PTO is paid time off. And so that's distinguished from taking calendar days off of vacation. So a lot of companies will give you, these are the days each year on the calendar we're going to take off. They put them out, whatever, so many months in advance. You're going to get Christmas, you're going to get Thanksgiving, you're going to get this, whatever that number is. And then you're going to get this many hours of PTO. And that's basically it's discretionary vacation where you get paid. That's the P in the paid. It's time off. You can use it when you need to. There may be certain rules about getting your requests and all that kind of business. I don't want to get this too bogged down about rules and this and that. I want to talk about the key abuses, and then I like to talk about the ways that we've seen to basically try to design a vacation package to include discretionary time or PTO that is good for people, because this idea of giving people time off is essential. And so here's PTO abuse number one, is that companies let their employees accumulate the hours and at the end of the year sell back a certain percentage that they don't use. And so this encourages people, especially if they're a little bit tight on money or things happen, to not take their vacation, which this is not good. We need our people to take the time off, and encouraging them to be able to sell it back or allowing them to be able to sell it back usually hurts some of the people who need the rest the longest, either because they've got a lot of things going on and so they're saving the money. They're counting on that money to try to get them over the hump, or they're some of your most committed people who feel like, usually erroneously, how's the company going to make
Survive
it without me? Right.
Yeah, or how's the company going to survive without me? Or if I'm not around, I hurt my colleagues.
Yeah.
And so the intention is really good, but it is definitely flawed because anything can happen to anybody. And so if you can get hit by a truck and not come into work and the organization has to survive without you, then you can most certainly take a day off and go to the beach.
Right. And as crazy as it sounds, we run into people like this all the time who are reluctant to take their time off.
Well, I do think, and again, I'm going to have to get a shirt made. I blame the Puritans because,
sure,
this, this idea that, you got to be tough and always hardworking in order to be valuable. It does permeate our society.
Yeah.
And I like hard work. In fact, I engage in a lot of hard work, but I also like vacation. And I come back and I have different ideas and my brain is fresh and I'm able to get stuff done that I wasn't able to get done before. And I see the benefits of the vacation. Yeah. And I just think that there is this, we were talking about a few minutes ago off camera. We have this CEO, very smart person, very innovative. And anyway, brags about only getting 4 hours of sleep. Winds up in the emergency room a lot because his life is crazy.
Yeah.
And
he's exhausted.
Yeah, he's exhausted. Yeah. His body is falling apart because of it. But he will continue to brag and continue to live this life because he has this idea that if you aren't hardworking, you're nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's very hard to put, it seems crazy that we have to have this conversation, but, we've been at this for many years doing this work in organizations, and people, partly because of the Puritan ethic, like Cindy's talked about, partly because, we're very important in our own stories And so we think we're the central player in our own drama, which in a lot of ways in our own mind we are.
Let me just tag on to that statement.
Hmm.
I think I've said this before, but it bears repeating. If you are actually a good leader, the place survives without you.
Yeah.
If it doesn't survive without you, you were not a good leader.
Yeah, it was not too long ago, I was doing a session and basically we were talking about the importance of vacation. And somebody said, well, I don't want to take vacation because when I come back, there's so much waiting for me that I feel terrible. And the couple days back before vacation is bad. And then, meaning as I'm coming back, I'm dreading this. And when I come back, it's a problem.
Yeah, we hear that all the time.
And I was gentle about it, but I was like, all right, well, what does that suggest? I mean, that's partly it's about you and your own anxiety, because it's going to be okay. It's always okay. Mm-hmm. It's just, you got a little work when you come back. And then partly it's telling you something about the organization. And so I'm like, what does that suggest? Well, it's suggesting that there's too much work in my job. And I'm like, well, is there anybody where you can give this to? And it turns out he's got 2 assistants. He's just not delegating to them. And so sometimes if you go away and when you come back, it's terrible. It's telling you something about the job. Like, we shouldn't have a job like this where somebody's absent and we're not able to keep things moving.
And if they're getting phone calls in the middle of their vacation, that
right, does make sense.
That is terrible because again, an organization should be able to survive if anybody in that organization were to accidentally get hit by a truck. Yeah. And so you have no reason to be calling somebody on a vacation.
Yeah.
There should be enough overlap. I know vacation makes things crazy busy for the people who are filling in for you, but it doesn't have to be one person who's filling in for you. Like, everybody can take a little bit of what you're doing. Give that person a break. Let them have their cruise or whatever it is. And if you don't have that ability to do that, then that is an indication that either there isn't enough redundancy in training, or you do not have enough employees.
Yeah, or the person isn't delegating properly. Like the example of the guy I was talking about.
Right.
Where it's actually his fault. Like, I mean, I didn't say that, but I'll tell you on the podcast, that person who dreads coming back from vacation so much that it ruins his 2 days before he comes back, and then his week when he comes back is ruined. And by the way, he has 2 assistants he could be delegating to.
That's his fault.
This is his fault.
It's not always the individual's fault.
Sometimes
the organization literally has everybody spread too thin.
Too thin.
And sometimes the policies, the way that they're set up around vacation, are not set up to protect employees to actually get their breaks. So, we're in a lot of healthcare and there's a lot of call, and nobody ever pays attention to who is actually on call. They just call the person that they know they can get the answers from. And that is a structural problem from the organization that is ruining your employees.
Yeah, we should do a whole podcast on call. Right. Basically, call is,
like, there needs to be
one terrible
number. Yeah. That's the on-call number.
Yeah.
And that is the number everybody calls, and you don't know who you're getting, but that's the person who's responsible, and everybody else gets a break.
Yeah. Yeah,
and the number gets forwarded to whomever is on call.
Yeah. This idea here of PTO and its abuses is that as soon as you let people pay for it, you begin distorting the function of it. It's supposed to be time off. And then if you let people buy it, pay it back, or get paid back for some of it that they don't use, it's adding an incentive for people, if they need to, for the money, or if they have this either partly, center of the universe issue going on, or there actually are a center of the universe because the organization's too thin in their area.
Right.
All I want to say about the pay part of PTO is once you let people pay for it, you distort its function as an ability for people to take time off. And so in creating your vacation system, do not let people buy their time back. Do not let people cash in PTO that they don't use. And don't let people bank more than a tiny number of hours if you want them to be able to build a base. You're actually better off with no bank available.
Yeah, I think so. The things that make it hard on employees and why they do the banking is, one,
Rainy day.
if something big happens.
Yeah.
Number two, they don't ever like that feeling that the next year they start with nothing.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for bringing that up. It shouldn't start at zero. You should let them at the end of the year, whenever your year ends, let's just for simplicity say it's December 31st, you have to use all your hours. And then on January 1st, you get all of the next hours. And
Right.
give them all of it at once. Trust your people to not burn it all early. And if they do, that's what you have managers for, to talk to them. Look, hey, I'll approve this, but that means by April you've used all your PTO. Or does this make sense? How's this going to work? And then I don't want to overcomplicate this, but you bring up an important point. Here's how I would design a system for PTO to prevent abuse. Establish all the calendar days off. Let's say in a year there's 10 of those. And then give them another slate of days to use in a discretionary allotment. Let's say that we're going to give them 14. And so in a year, that's 24 days off, 10 on the calendar, and then 14 worth. And by the way, that 14, you split it up into hours. And so it's 14 days times 8 hours. So they can take a couple here, a couple there, if they want to use them for half days, et cetera. And then you use that during the calendar year, from January to the end of December. Start January, the end of December, and you have to use them all. And none of them can be carried over. And you cannot get paid for any of them. And then if something happens during the year and you need more time off, we have a mechanism in the company where you can put in for an emergency request. And that emergency request, again, I'm trying to keep this simple, but you can decide how you're going to handle that. Some of the things that people need to take time off for are covered under FMLA. Some of the things you'll decide as a company, we're actually going to cover those things.
Right, because FMLA is not covered.
It's not paid.
Right.
It's covered by law, but it's
not paid.
That's right.
Right. So when you're out of vacation time,
that's right.
You're not getting paid during FMLA in most companies. So that is one of the reasons why people are afraid to go to zero on their PTO.
And in my system, you're never at zero. The minute you're actually at zero, December 31st, the next second you pick up 2 weeks. The very next second is now January 1st. And so you're never actually out.
See, I'm not really tracking this.
All right. Tell me what I have failed to line out.
Giving them everything January 1st.
Everything. You got it all.
Which means I can blow my 2 weeks in April.
That's right.
Which means I then have zero.
You have nothing.
Until next January 1st.
You have nothing.
Which then means I can go to zero.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, you can. So yes, you can go to zero. And you can go to zero in February if you want to. But that's a conversation that your manager is going to have with you. Hey, I see you put this request in. Like that's going to put you at zero. Are you going to be okay with that? And by the way, if you need time off, we'll let you take time. You're just not going to get paid for it. Or you're going to have to go into the emergency request bucket that we have a process for in the company, and how the emergency requests are fielded, and what that means, and this is what we'll give you in the emergency request. It's basically like not an appeal, but it's a process you go through, a separate process.
Yeah, see, I don't mind most of what you're saying with that clarification, except that the reason why some of these people are not taking their vacation time is they're afraid to go to zero.
And what would you do? How would you eliminate that concern? Let them keep a certain base that they built over a year or two?
No, I'm not saying that. I think that it does have to be the exception.
Yeah.
I think that when they're out of it, and if something happens, even if it's FMLA, is this an emergency where like we're going to, like, it's just a one-off? Are we going to help?
Agree.
It's like a global bank, and the first step on the global bank is, okay, you got something going on in your family and you can't be here. Step one, is it possible to give you partial hours, recognizing that you have to be present for your family with whatever is actually going on, that you can work remotely, so that way we can still pay you but get some value back.
Yeah.
So we're not depleting the truly, this is an emergency and there's nothing that I can do to earn my money.
Right. Yeah. We're saying the same thing. That's the emergency component.
That's step one of the emergency. Step two is like, sometimes like you are actually just injured and need time to recover. And so is there a bank that would stabilize your income, and may not be 100%, but at least partially, so that way when you can't work, but like the idea is that it's temporary. It was a surprise, one-off, temporary thing, that there's a pool of money that can help float you until you get better, so your life doesn't actually completely fall apart.
Yeah, I'm glad we're having this conversation. It's very easy to make this complicated. And there needs to be an emergency type or crap happens mechanism in your company. And I don't dispute that. But what I'm suggesting is there's parts of this that I don't think are that difficult. Your company would be crazy to not basically slow itself down and give breaks on the regular holiday days, because almost nobody wants to work.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so
there, like we've talked about before, there's some companies in some industries that like you're on 24 hours, somebody's going to have to be there.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that's plank one, and it's not very controversial. And if you're running an emergency room, you got to do things differently, understand. But 99% of companies, there's a handful of calendar days. There's no reason you should be working as a company. Let your people take off. It's healthy and it makes sense, and it's in alignment with the broader society you live in. That's uncontroversial, piece one. Piece two, now getting a little more controversial, but still I can articulate this simply. Give people some discretionary time off, and do not let them get paid out if they don't use it.
And cancel it if they don't use it.
And counsel them if they don't use it. Like this should be a discussion, not necessarily negative, but you should be talking to anybody who leaves a single hour. Why did you leave this single hour? Oh, this big project and this and that. And it's giving you a clue of either they're not managing their time very well, or we did make them a little thin. Okay, that's our bad. Whatever. I don't know. It's a fact finding. But that second piece is people need discretionary time, but it should blow up at the end of the year, and under no circumstance should people get paid for it, for all the reasons that we've already talked about, and for its distorting effect on your company if you let people do that.
And we haven't talked about it yet, but there's a distorting effect that, because you've recognized that the reason why people do that is they want the money. But you shouldn't have to actually sacrifice your well-being. We need a more sustainable solution if you need more money.
Yes.
Like And that is part of also the conversation, I think. Like, if you need the vacation money, then is there something else that you can do for this organization, or maybe you need to move on to another job, or maybe you need a raise? Like, what is it that gets you more money?
Right. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to say that because, like, I mean, I get, like, that's a legitimate problem, and I think a lot of people look to the vacation time for that extra money and actually need it, but that's not a long-term solution.
Yeah. Fundamentally, across a lot of our advice, we are telling companies, and we're telling the people listening to this podcast, to take vacation a lot more seriously and scrutinize its use, which is what you're saying right now. If your company mistakenly, in our view, allows people to get paid for PTO they don't use, and people are doing that, that is a conversation. Are there things we can do? Are you underpaid? Do you need a side hustle that we're going to have to absorb that? Or it's time for you to look for another work? I mean, all of these.
Or credentials,
yes,
or whatever.
But we're not going to let you make up that delta by not taking your vacation. And, the side hustle piece, again, this is all a conversation that a manager has with a direct report. If you need a side hustle, but that side hustle is a second job that you're taking after working for us 40 hours a week, and that is degrading your performance because you are getting tired. Now you're not taking your vacation. You're working your other job. Eventually, we're going to be talking about that as well.
Hello, Musers. Now it's time for commercial break. I'm going to talk about our organizational survey. It is a good way for you to sort of get the pulse on the organization. It pulls out some of the themes about what's going on. We can break it down in different ways.
Yeah.
We try to protect the individuals, so on small departments we're somewhat limited, but if your departments are moderately sized, we can break it down to the department level. We give feedback in different ways, so even in the small departments, they have a direction that they can take if they choose to improve. They just don't get defined information about exactly where they sat.
Yep.
And then we break it down with our other organizations that are also in our database that have participated in the survey, and so you can get a comparison within your industry or across industries. And basically, it's just a nice tool to stimulate a conversation with the leadership team and help them think through where the hotspots are in the organization and what they want to tackle and how they might go about tackling it. So it's data that they then can use to focus in the right areas and build a plan around it.
Yeah. It's precise, it's customized, and it returns feedback that you can use immediately. People love it. Culsure.com. CULSURE. Culsure.com. CULSURE. Organizational assessments. You need them. Tell you how you're doing. Help you get better.
Call us.
Call us. All of these are conversations that we need to have. If we're to take vacation and its lack thereof a little more seriously, because we want people to be as close to at their best as we can. Performance over time. Piece 1, days on the calendar. Piece 2, discretionary. Don't let them sell it back and make them take it all. Then you need your piece 3, which you're going to have to figure out. And there's more stuff that you have to consider, but that's your emergency mechanism for how you hit that. But as you said, from a company standpoint, the company might plan for, the company's going to allot budgetarily this many hours in its facility for emergency use for employees who need it. And then when you need to tap that emergency allotment bucket, you go through a process, and then some group of people, 1 to 2 people, whatever, decide, all right, you're going to get this many hours. We're going to cover you for this. And some years the company won't use all of the allotment, and then it can decide if it wants to redistribute that in terms of an extra day worth of PTO next year. I don't know. There's a million ways that you can do that. Or do we bank that as a rainy day and we let that allotment in the company grow bigger next year in case next year there are more people who need the hours than we have? There's a million ways that you can do this. But our encouragement is to take as much of the gaming out of that discretionary chunk as you possibly can by having that PTO not be a little wage booster or not be a bank builder, but actually be, this is how many hours this company is going to pay you to be completely and utterly off during this calendar year.
I think that part of that third bucket is that you're trying to give a mechanism to your employees so that way psychologically they can take it down to zero.
Yeah.
Because I see a lot of employees on top of the gaming stuff that's going on, but I see a lot of employees who are just like, you know, what happens if there's an emergency and I've used everything? Like, people get really uncomfortable. Some of the people whom I've coached, they're in an organization where if they're going out for maternity leave, which maternity leave again is not necessarily paid. Like, you're granted it, but it's not paid. They'll make you take all your PTO. And so
understand.
We've had people who got pregnant and then basically blew through all their PTO in January and now have an infant.
Right. What I'm suggesting based on my experience, and please share yours, is that anytime an employee's using something, using a vacation day that's not one of the calendar days, it's not one of the discretionary days, the manager should be clued in as to what's going on, and that we should be keeping track of who's going out in this third bucket and when. And we're trying to do that because we want to be responsive of when people need help. And there'll be times when, you know, I mean, we could populate this with hundreds of examples of times that people have had a weird illness and the specialist couldn't figure it out, and a company carried this employee for weeks and sometimes months with pay, and they weren't working. And the other employees didn't think that's screwed up, this person should be working. They thought, thank goodness, this is what I expected my company to do. It's taking care of somebody who needs it. I have more confidence they'll take care of me when I get in a period of time like this. But if you give people sick leave and it resembles anything like PTO, then people will use it. I understand that people need the confidence that there's flexibility built into their benefit system for when something goes wrong, which I'm calling an emergency. And in that case, all I'm recommending is that there's a mechanism that you can tap into, and the company has predicted in all of the ways that companies are able to predict these things about how many hours total they think they're going to need for the year, and you draw on that when you need it. But every time you need to draw on it, your manager knows, and it's documented. And so that we know who's drawing on it and how often and what for.
Yeah.
But we work in companies, many companies, where sick leave is just PTO by another name. If your company's able, probably the easiest solution is for what you and I are calling sick days, not the emergency fund, just add a few more PTO days. Just, here's what we're going to give you for PTO. Pick a number. I think I used 2 weeks before, 14 days.
Yeah, because nobody wants to get actually into the business of being
That's
like,
right.
oh, you're
Terrible
sick.
business to be in.
I'm going to need
Terrible.
a doctor's note for
Terrible
that.
business to be
I
in.
mean, first of all, sometimes people just wake up and they're like, well,
Terrible
I
business
don't
to be
really
in.
want to go to work today.
Yeah. So if you can, just you tell people, look, we've given a few extra days in PTO where the normal allotment is 2 weeks of PTO. We've added another 3 days on top for sick days. And we're calling the PTO. If you have a great year and you don't get sick, take 3 extra days off. But they're there for you. So now you're going to get it's all PTO though. Use it. Again, managers have to track this, but we're in a ton of places where managers' jobs are made difficult and employees are forced to make gamesmanship type choices because the HR system is overly complicated. And even in this discussion, we're revealing some of the complications, but I want to try to simplify it. And I think you bring up a good point about this sick leave. Easiest way to give people a little of that flexibility is just to add what you might have been calling sick leave and just add it and give them extra PTO days, subject to the same PTO rules, and just tell them we included 3 sick days in there, but they're in PTO. You can use it however. You don't need a doctor's note. You don't need to be sick, what have you. And then when things go wrong, there's the emergency vehicle, the emergency pool. And that is going to require a little more work, a little more effort to put together, but that is there.
And it may not be a straight out, you're getting paid to be elsewhere and not contribute. It may, there may be a level where it's your light duty or your virtual duty.
Sure. Yeah.
Or some combination of the two.
Yeah. Don't complicate this. It would be our advice to our clients. And because people are obsessively focused on fairness and equity, rewards and punishments. And vacation hits almost all these, right? It's a reward, and it's something where it's very equitable. Why is this person off? Why are they getting more time than me? And I think from seeing a lot of the distortions of these systems over time, vacation system, which are very important, that's where I am today. It's this moment in time. Days on the calendar plus days of PTO plus embedded in those PTO sick days, which you can use just like vacation or subject to no rules.
Yeah, my stance on the sick leave separated versus combined is if you're not in a position to actually require documentation that they're actually sick, which means that basically they'd have to go to a doctor. Like if you're trying to give just people the ability to wake up, discern themselves that they're not feeling great, then put it in the PTO bucket. Because if you're not actually getting documentation, then it is actually PTO.
Yeah. And that's in there.
Right.
And then if you've got something and it's pneumonia, well, you're going to see a doctor. We want you to see a doctor. And then that's the emergency bucket. And in that emergency bucket, a part of the way you tap that is you're talking about, here's what I've got, and here's what the doctor said, and here's the doctor and all this. Not that you need a lot of forms to tap the emergency bucket, but it's a conversation.
Yeah, it's definitely more formal than what most sick leave currently is in organizations. Yeah.
Most sick leave that we see, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, that I see is basically PTO in disguise.
Well, might as well be, because I mean, like
if you're not going to enforce, it's not going to be enforced.
Right. If you're not verifying it.
Yeah.
Which there may, I mean, there's privacy reasons for you not wanting to verify it, but if you want to give people the ability to just feel like they're having a bad day and need to take the day off, or that they just don't feel right and need to take the day off without having to haul over to a doctor and basically blow their day waiting to be seen by somebody.
Yeah.
Then it's PTO. Don't call it sick leave. Just call it PTO.
Yeah. We want a system where people can get the time off they need. They feel like the company is generous without being crazy in their generosity, generous to the point where it's hard to actually get the work done. We want employees to feel like the company has their back. We want all those things in our vacation package. But we don't want to have our employees feel like they're constantly having to play three-dimensional chess to decide whether to take a day off or not. And when the inevitable stuff happens, we want people talking to a manager. That's what part of being a manager is about. But if you've overcomplicated your system over the years, it becomes like if you let people, for example, build big balances of PTO, and then something happens. We've seen where companies make people burn PTO for what should be an emergency request. There's something that's actually wrong. But the people are sitting on this balance that they've built up,
right?
Because they're planning on retiring in 4 years and getting paid out $25,000,
right?
From this, like they're already
right.
Have written a check for this money. It's the down payment on the RV that the whole, exaggerating, but I mean, I don't think I'm telling our audience anything on this part they don't know. This is how people work. Once you tell them what the system is, people will figure out, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. Boom, that's my RV. All these PTO hours I haven't used, burning myself out these last few years, and I'm going to use it. And then heaven forbid, 2 years before I'm going to retire, I get disease X, illness X, and I'm actually in need of a lot of days off and a big recovery. And the company is going to give me a few of those, but it's looking at this gigantic balance. And it's like, well, just use your PTO for that.
Oh, yeah, that's for sure what most companies are going to say. Yeah.
And we shouldn't, again, you and I, we don't work in a perfect world. If there was a perfect world, we wouldn't have jobs. We live in the imperfect world, and we see this all the time, is that companies create systems for vacation that they haven't fully thought through. And then when the distortions come, they're way too slow to change it because it's going to hurt. It's like ripping a Band-Aid off to tell everybody, you know what, we're done letting you buy out your stuff. We're done letting you cash out. No more cash out. This last year, cash everything out this year. We'll let you cash that $25,000, but you got to cash it out 5 years before you're going to retire. And starting the year after, you can't build any balance. You're going to have to actually use all your vacation. And that hurts when they have to do that. So they delay. And then life happens in the intervening, and this huge pot of PTO may get blown on something else. And that puts the company in a terrible position of, why should we fund all this rehabilitation for this person who had this illness that we've already given them a month and a half for? And they actually need another month and a half, but they're sitting on a $25,000 check for an RV from hoarding their PTO.
Right, but that was actually part of their pay package. Right. And so now they're basically just paying for their own health care, where other people who didn't bank it were getting the emergency funds. And
I'm saying, take that all out. If you're thinking about starting a company, here's my recommendation for how to do holidays. Take all of the ones on the calendar when people aren't going to work anyway and give them off. And then be as generous as you can with PTO, and then add a few extra days and tell them that's your sick leave. You can use it just like a vacation, and you can burn it in Vegas if you want, for all I care, if you're 25 years old and not going to get sick at all. And anything else where life happens, talk to your manager. We've got an emergency facility. As a company, we allot, and you can be transparent depending on the size of your company. This is how many hours we allot. It's in the bank. We plan on having to pay this much. You got to tap the facility. If we don't use it all, we might make a bigger facility next year in case we have that rainy day next year, or we might give it away in bonuses, or we might just put it back to the company in R&D, or we're going to do a company, whatever. Who cares? But that's how I would do it. What would you do?
I think similar, but I don't think I would do bonuses, because then you're again encouraging people to not take care of themselves. And so I think it goes back in some way that doesn't encourage gaming. I could see the bonuses being gaming. And I don't think that you get the emergency fund because you have a sore throat. Like if you've used all your PTO and you get a sore throat, then you're having a day off without pay. I guess sore throat doesn't really seem like that's emergency.
Yeah, or you talk with your manager and just work from home.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yes, so you're not bringing in... We don't want to encourage people to bring in contagion. So I do actually like the idea of, okay, you got a sore throat. It's not... You're not going to die from it. But here's the light duty that you can do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Without contaminating the rest of us.
Right. And if this is going on for a few days, we hit the emergency. And you're going in. You're on the... then you're in the fund. And you're on the record, so to speak. Not that it's a bad thing, but we're keeping track. We're trying to...
Yeah, we want to make sure that people aren't wind up gaming it, which I don't think most people will.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have to have a mechanism to make sure that nobody is gaming it.
Yeah.
It's a sad state of affairs, but you do.
And I don't think it's always the people. Or let me say it differently.
No, I think most people won't game it.
Yeah, it's the system. And it sets up a distortion where the employee is basically having to gamify how they're using their time off. And instead of the conversation being between employee and manager, it's basically the employee gaming an HR system, where what we're recommending is the simplest system you can, generous but simple, in the ways that we've laid out over the course of this discussion. And when you hit the inevitable gray areas where there's discernment needed, that conversation starts employee to manager. That's where it starts. And not always employee to HR or employee to what is the system state that I should be doing. One of the things that managers have to do is they have to sort through the needs of their direct reports when stuff happens. And stuff is going to happen in any kind of system we can create. But we're trying to truly take care of our people in a way that's not overcomplicating it for the company and for the employee. That is the original sin, in my view, of PTO abuse, is that a well-intentioned HR system basically overcomplicates the granting of discretionary time and enables people to do a variety of things with it, like hoard it or turn it into money. That then...
Or both.
Yeah. That then leads to people not resting themselves for all of the reasons that we've talked about. And the emergency mechanism, which we spent a great deal of time talking about here, is important, essential even, because you cannot run an effective company where employees think, if something happens, the company doesn't have my back. We have a friend of ours who basically works for an organization where she puts out a legal update every year. And it's basically a bestseller. And all the money accrues to her employer. But people know she's the one who wrote it. And so, not being jerks, but we asked her once, why don't you just do this on your own? You're close enough to have enough money for retirement anyway. Why don't you just do this on your own and take the money?
Everybody knows you.
Everybody knows you. And she's like, it's a great question. Let me tell you why. When I had this issue happen 15 years ago, I needed to take off 6 months. And the company said, work when you can, do what you can. You got to fix this thing that's gotten off track in your life. Take all the time you need. And they paid me in full. And I came back at the end of the 6 months and I'd figured it out. They'd given me the time. And I promised from then on that almost no matter what happened, I was always going to be loyal to this company. And she has for, I don't know,
Well,
over
20,
a decade,
it's at
20
least,
years.
It's at least, well, it's actually even more than that
Yeah.
at this point. It's
Yeah.
probably 25.
And our mentor for negotiation, Galen Paulson, famously said to us, always be on the lookout for things you can do that cost you a little but gain you a lot.
And she's been a cash cow.
Yeah. Yeah. And this idea of taking care of employees when they need it, if you build a simple system without gamesmanship, people won't game it. And so don't worry that people are going to take advantage of your system if you build a simple one. Be generous when you can, and most of your people will pay you back in loyalty. We want systems for time off, vacation, sick leave that employees can count on, but try to make them as simple as you possibly can. That is our advice.
All right. Thanks for joining us today on Management Muse. We appreciate any share, likes, and so forth. We'll have some sites and the notes that you can turn to, and we'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to learn more about the topic, check out our show notes. And if you want to help us out, like, share, subscribe, and 5 stars are all deeply appreciated. See you next time on the Management Muse.